Welcome to another edition of Medical Device Packaging TV. This program is brought to you by Stahl Scientific. Join us today as we explore together important issues surrounding sterile and critical packaging. Once again, thank you for tuning in to Medical Device Packaging TV.
Hi, I'm Jan Gaze with PackWise Consulting, and I'm here today to talk about Packaging Process Operational Qualification, or OQ. Now, with process validations, the CFR says that you have to, well, I'll just repeat what it says. CFR 820.75A is where the results of a process cannot be fully verified by subsequent inspection and test. The process shall be validated with a high degree of assurance and approved per established procedures. That all boils down to when you're doing a seal for an SBS medical device, you need to make sure that you validate that process because you cannot continuously inspect a seal. With your OQ, that is a process of obtaining and documenting evidence that the installed equipment operates within a predetermined limit. So in this particular case, we've already gone over the OQ for the equipment. I'm talking more OQ for your material this time. And this is what's necessary for the ISO 11607 standard. You can actually put a design qualification with your OQ because you also need to do a design qualification of your package and material system with your upper and lower process parameters that you're determining with your OQ. You just got to make sure it's repeatable and reproducible. Now, when you're doing a packaging operation qualification, you have to get your worst case operation conditions and validate that those conditions are correct or acceptable for use, which is why I was talking about doing this with your design qualification if you need to. Okay, with your OQ on a packaging operation qualification, you must document your production process parameters. So those are usually just inside the test parameters that you actually use, if you can do it that way. You have to know your equipment tolerances in order to pick that up and make it work right. And this is where I was talking before with the EIOQ. You have to know what your equipment upper and lower maximums are of operation so that you can make sure that your material is within there. When you're doing this type of work, you have to know your material sealing parameters, and you have to make sure you understand your equipment tolerances. So with production capacity, you need to understand how your sealer cools and how your pressure fluctuates and how your temperature fluctuates, because you've got to bake all that into your OQ, or else you're not going to have a process that is repeatable and usable and always gives you a good seal strength and a continuous seal. So when you're sealing, you have to worry about 3 parameters: time, temperature, pressure. And while you're doing this, you have to blend them all together, and the best way to do that is with a DOE or something along that line, where you're putting those 3 pieces in, and you actually end up optimizing your sealing parameters within a box. Because you want to make sure that you are actually sealing right in the middle of whatever your outlying parameters are, so that when you're doing your testing and you're checking your worst case, you actually are testing your worst case. Otherwise, you're not sure. And if you've got some fluctuations going on that was unexpected, say a brownout that might affect your voltage, if you're right on the bare minimum edge of where your sealing parameters need to be, you're going to have problems. But if you've gone a very robust type of testing system and made sure that your midpoint is set up in a DOE properly, you're not going to have to worry about your product going out the door and whether it's going to stay sterile or not. So you have to do performance testing. If you've worked with performance testing for your 11607 qualifications, you know that ends up being usually a shock and vibration distribution test for your materials. Now, when you're doing your seal test, because part of how you start all this is making sure that your seal has the right strength and is continuous. You've got to validate your test method. The ASTM F88 is an ASTM method that everybody tends to use with one of the techniques, but you've got to make sure that you're actually doing your seal strengths are actually falling within the limits of what the ASTM says. So even if you use an ASTM, you still need to validate and make sure that you're actually doing it properly. And you have to be consistent on what technique you're doing and how you are actually cutting your samples to make it, and how your equipment is set up to make sure that it's consistent all the way through.
This program is brought to you by Stahl Scientific. Discover why organizations like the Department of Defense, NASA, and the Center for Disease Control make Stahl Scientific a prime partner. Each episode, Medical Device Packaging TV brings more important insight from industry experts. Once again, thank you for tuning in to Medical Device Packaging TV.
Stahl Scientific. Innovations in critical packaging.